Josh is someone who is been working in the field for some time, is recognized as a star in the practitioner space, and he has been living some of what we were just talking about. He has actually stepped forward to create organizations to move towards raising awareness. He's founder of, is it We Are the Cavalry?
I am the Cavalry.
I Am the Cavalry. So this is a group to try to make the change. We can't wait for the cavalry to get here. We are the cavalry. And a number of other initiatives, including working on legislation, raising awareness. When he spoke here about 4 years ago, we got incredibly positive feedback about the things he had to say. And so, of course, what better way to end today's session than by inviting Josh Corman to come back and inspire us again. So, Josh.
Thank you. Is my mic hot? Yes? Okay. I don't like podiums much, so I'm probably going to walk around a little, unless it screws up the camera. I'm going to talk about Bits and Bytes, Flesh and Blood, and both honor the first 20 years of this fantastic program and say we have to do much, much better for the next 20. It's tough to predict the future. The last panel got me thinking. A few thoughts, introductions. As Beth mentioned, I'm one of the founders of IamTheCavalry.org. The idea was the cavalry isn't coming on areas affecting public safety and human life in the increased connectivity of everything, IoT. We naively believed if we can get as high and deep as we could in federal government and intelligence community, that if we got the right message to the right adults, they'd just fix it. And what we found was we got as high and deep as you can get. It took years to get that credibility. We shared our concerns, and the answer was, we can't do that. There's no political will for this. We would take a real tragedy first on this. So we went to the bar that night and said, you know, the cavalry isn't coming. No one's going to save us. And it took a few months and a personal tragedy for me to really finish that thought. In fact, the last time I was here was in between me losing my mother to cancer and my decision to finally launch I Am the Cavalry. So if you go watch that video, you'll see a near precursor to my thoughts fully forming. But the other half of that is if something's missing from the world, it falls to us to put it there. So the cavalry isn't coming is both overwhelming, depressing, demoralizing, and it's empowering. And I meant to say this when I first walked up, but for all the students way in the back, this is not a spectator sport. So there's a ton of seats way up front with some really impressive leaders that I've learned a ton from. So if you want to be bold, please come forward and find a closer seat. So the cavalry is 100% volunteer. We started with about 50 crazy idiot altruists that wanted to be protectors to see if we could try to be a voice of reason in technical literacy, an ambassador, a translator to public policymakers, the public at large, and safety critical industries. And we said it's wherever bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, so anything that can kill you. So we focused on hackable vehicles, medical technologies, oil and gas, high-speed rail, any of the intersections there. And you've heard this sentiment several times, but our problem statement was very succinct. It said our dependence on connected technology is growing faster than our ability to secure it in areas affecting public safety and human life. And you're going to see at the end of my slides a slightly longer sentence, but that encapsulates even more of that sentiment and zeitgeist there. And we didn't really know what to do, but we knew we had to try something. And it really wasn't our technical prowess, it was our empathy. Our founding principle was empathy. How do we meet the people that we need to influence at their level in their frame and elevate them? Because we wanted to be safer sooner together. We know eventually we will figure this out. We can't wait. The response times in these safety critical industries are so protracted, they're so long, that waiting to start any movement is going to be too late. And one of the ways I like to talk about this now is that there's a promise and a peril to connected technology, right? And humans adopt technologies for immediate and obvious benefits. We almost never do the cost-benefit analysis to anticipate the deferred, less obvious costs, right? And now we're adopting things so ferociously that we can't even tell what cause and effect are anymore. So even when we feel the negative consequences of an adoption later, we've decoupled cause and effect, and we're not really learning anything about it. So that's one of the hats I wear, and it's primarily what I prepared most of today's remarks around, is the cavalry volunteer hat. We've got a couple hundred folks now, and they're not just white hat hackers. I probably should have stated I am not a hacker. You can tell because I'm not wearing a hoodie. But I think I actually am a hacker. I think we've been hacking public policy in hearts and minds. And that's really, I think, the next 20 years is going to be much more about our ability to communicate, inspire, and assist our teammates than it is about us trying to be individual heroes on our own. The other hat I'm wearing is about 5 months ago, I left the think tank land. We did a big surge for 2 years to try to drive cyber safety into consciousness. You're going to hear that phrase a lot from me, cyber safety. And I joined a company called PTC, which almost no one's heard of, but it's kind of like everywhere in industrial IoT, medical devices, cars, airplanes, et cetera. So some of the people in this room know. But what I saw is of all the areas where bits and bytes meet flesh and blood, the sector I think is least mature and furthest behind is this industrial IoT section. We've done pretty good things in medical. We've done some pretty good things in cars. We're nowhere near done, but they're at least on a path. So I'd literally like to team with folks in this room to catalyze corrective action and movement on this particular sector. And I only put up this graphic because this is their new logo. It's supposed to be a P, if you can see the P, for physical, and a D, which I didn't see right away, for digital. It's the convergence of physical and digital, and they're really excited at this, right? You get predictive maintenance, you get much tighter feedback loops, you get to do agile on durable goods development. All these great things come from the convergence of physical and digital, right? But I want you to take a quick 10-second look and burn that into your retina because I feel like something's missing from that, right? And I'm like, I gotta go work there, right? So I'm their first chief security officer because if bits and bytes meet flesh and blood and they're talking about physical digital convergence, all right, how do we make sure that that's gonna reward the promise but not the peril? But I have to take a brief moment to talk about one of my heroes, Stan Lee. This was Stan Lee's last Comic-Con tour. If you're not a comic book fan, that's okay. I tend to lean Marvel. They're more accessible heroes that you can identify with. And he's really the brainchild behind most of the heroes you can think of, or at least had an assist in a role there. And he just lost his wife this year. He's really getting old. His health is waning. So this is his last Comic-Con tour. And right beforehand, he had just lost his wife. And they said, do not give him condolences. Do not tell him how sorry you feel. Instead, tell him how he inspired you or changed your lives or something like that. And I was trying to think, what could I say in the 1 minute I have when he's going to sign my shield? What could I say to thank this man for inspiring me? And if you think about it, you've lived a really, really good life if you can point to a moment of heroism or a moment of service or sacrifice you've made for other people, a moment. You've lived a phenomenal life if you've lived the life of a hero and had the heart of a servant and done things for more than just yourself. And there's lots of ways to show heroism. What I really was struck by as I tried to think of what do I say to a man like Stan Lee, it's an entirely different, special type of person who isn't a hero, but who has inspired hundreds of thousands of people to feel heroic and to want to do something. So I tried to say to him that I've dedicated the last 4 lives to trying to save lives through security research, and that anything I even approximate accomplishing, he has part credit for. And not just for me, but for every single person he's ever inspired. And you can see I had shaved my head there, and I had a beard, and the only thing I'm kind of missing is a bow tie, because I think the Stan Lee of cybersecurity is SPAF. And I'm really honored to be part of SPAF's family and the CERIAS family. And this is the house that SPAF built. There's a lot of names he went through last night, and all of them have shared a part in the custody and the stewardship of creating this for the first 20 years. But I'm really humbled to know Eugene and everyone that's come through this program. And I'm excited by the next round and where we're going to go from there. So speaking of comic books, I showed this slide at the last one 4 years ago, and very few people got it. But while Marvel's really good at heroes that I can identify with, DC's better at villains, I think. But I'm going to get really bold and really aggressive, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I think one of the reasons people really liked the talk last time is I respected the audience enough and the students enough to be honest and to share my deep concerns, and I'd like to say things have gotten a lot better in the last 4 years, and they have. We've done some amazing things in the last 4 years, and they've gotten a lot worse, and the consequences of failure are reaching levels that we're not going to be able to sustain. So I'm going to be very aggressive. I tend to hate FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, like most of you do, but I want to remind you that just because it's scary doesn't mean it isn't true. And the last couple of years have been pretty trying. I'm going to share some of that. Now, to get really serious really quickly, people keep saying that nothing's going to change until people die, right? So after 4 years of trying to talk to public policymakers to get in front of these things, I did what any self-respecting hacker would do. I killed 3 people in a simulation in Arizona. Well, and I'm going to show you that simulation video. Yeah, it's just clearing my throat. So we're going to come back to this first ever clinical hacking simulation with real physicians in a hospital to combine the art of the demonstrable hacking with the actual physiology of what would and wouldn't happen. But somebody mentioned both yesterday and today the notion of a cyber Pearl Harbor or cyber 9/11 and all these things that are pretty offensive if you really think about them. And they just never really sat right with me. Well, we work with a law professor, Andrea Matwishin. She's written a legal brief that's coming out shortly called The Internet of Bodies. She's been working on it for the 6 years I've known her. And she actually put this idea in our head that it's not going to happen like that. It's going to happen like this. Does anybody know what this picture is? So this is a river on fire from pollution. It's the Cuyahoga River. If you've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cincinnati, it's about right here. The pollution in that river was so bad that the river caught on fire. How do you put out a burning river? Think about it. So this was a photo snapped of them trying to put out this blazing inferno. And I'd like to tell you that that is what caused people to say, you know, maybe we should stop polluting so much. Maybe we should introduce the Clean Water Act or the EPA, which was a successor. This was not the first time the river caught on fire. And it's not the first time damage was done. It burned down bridges plural times. It burned factories. There was significant property damage. This was the 22nd time across 70 years. So with the Cuyahoga River, it was kind of like there was no single boom. There was no single inflection point. And honestly, when you have one of those, you're going to have a knee-jerk reaction. You're going to go too far. But we think it's going to be more like a cyber Cuyahoga, where we're going to have a series of fires, and eventually we'll say enough is enough, and we'll do something about it. Our goal, though, is not to wait for that inflection point knee-jerk, but to have the teammates and the scaffolding and the groundwork done and certain primitives in place before that moment so that we can have a thoughtful, planful response. So I'm going to tell you guys things that you know already, but just to remind you, I'm going to suggest we've had several fires. And I think we're pretty close to that inflection point, if not already having evidence that we've hit it. So we've known for 20-something years you could hack power grids. Now Ukraine's got an existence proof, right? We know that you can use Shodan.io to search for connected industrial control systems naked on the internet. No hacking required. Often it's a hard-coded maintenance password you couldn't change if you wanted to. In fact, now Autosploit takes a Shodan search, combines it with a Metasploit module, and automatically with Python just pops the box. It's terrifying. So now DOJ is starting to selectively unseal documents of Iranian hackers doing this, and subnationals and extremist groups are doing this pretty routinely now. We've known that hospitals are prone, and yet for a long time we enjoyed relative obscurity from attackers. But what scared the bejesus out of me, made me quit my private sector job and go to the think tank for 2 years, was when I saw Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital taken offline for a week. It was a single Java deserialization flaw in a single Java library and a single medical technology took out a hospital for a week. And this wasn't deliberate. It was the SamSam ransomware, but they weren't targeting hospitals. So we like to say in the cavalry, malfeasance is not a prerequisite to harm, or malicious intent is not a prerequisite to harm. So it's not just adversaries, it's accidents and adversaries. And with this kind of impact, I got really, really scared that we were out of time. Now, one of the reasons for that is last time I was here, I talked a little bit about my research into the rise of hacktivism and anonymous. Spent a couple of years doing some pretty risky stuff there. But we took it seriously, we took it carefully, and one of the reasons I researched it, I said, look, anonymous is the first wave. I'm much more concerned about what comes next. In fact, we wrote a series called Building a Better Anonymous with a blueprint of the Guy Fawkes mask as the primary image. And we said this blueprint will be adopted and perfected by others. Now, at the time, there wasn't even a group called ISIS. But one of the kids in Team Poison in the UK, an honor student named Junaid Hussain, who went by the handle of Trick, he did a brief stint in jail for successfully hacking Tony Blair's website. And at some point after getting out, he radicalized, moved to Raqqa, Syria with his wife and kid, and founded the Cyber Caliphate. When he was killed with the drone strike, he was the #4 man on the Allied kill list. They paid him dollar for dollar the same they paid their battlefield commanders. So they valued and treasured him. If you remember the Garland, Texas shootings, he personally orchestrated that attack on U.S. soil and others. Very screwed up, very angry, very dangerous person who was a script kiddie, but talented enough to take human life. And finally, CNN did a little bit of a documentary on just how easy it was to create Trick. And he did quite a bit of recruiting and training, and the cyber caliphate still exists, and we're still knocking people off as we can. But that should scare you, because out of 7 billion human beings, it doesn't matter what most would do. It matters what one would do. And what you had in Trick was someone with the means, motive, and opportunity to take human life. So when I look at something like Hollywood Presbyterian, the first thing I said was, thank God Trick is dead. Because if an accident could take out a single hospital, is there any technical barrier to a sustained denial of patient care on any or all hospitals in the US? No. And I'm going to get to that very aggressively in a few minutes. So it's not a matter of will this happen. We know it's going to happen. The bigger issue I have is back to the promise and the peril. When it happens, we're not going to have an elegant and prompt response. It's going to be like the BP oil spill. It's going to be on the news every night, because we're not going to know how to shut it off and stop it, because we don't have the talent in place or the infrastructure in place or the scaffolding and the response plans in place. We don't do the drills. We don't do the simulations. We don't know what we would do if you couldn't access electronic health records for weeks at a time. We don't. So it's not the loss of life on day one I'm concerned about. It's the crisis of confidence in the public to trust these otherwise superior technologies. I'm afraid the chief medical officers will retreat to less connected and less effective treatment. Now, it's not all bad news. I said we did a surge. My deputy and I both quit our private sector jobs. We went into a think tank called Atlantic Council. We drove really hard on cyber safety, first of a kind. We were targeting 3. We got 18 in the first year. So there was an appetite. We did find willing allies in parts of government. We went real deep with the FDA, and that success became a model for other agencies to pick that up. Some stuff in Europe, one of the approaches we used, people were talking about labeling a few minutes ago, whether it's a good housekeeping seal. We talked about a 5-star cyber safety framework for connected vehicles. So you could tell safer vehicles from less safe vehicles. The one that really took root was the companion we used for the FDA, which was, here's a Hippocratic oath for connected medical devices. You must be this tall to ride the Internet of Medical Things, right? And we have fancy words under the framework, but basically when I tell my neighbor, it's how do you avoid failure, take help avoiding failure, capture, study, and learn from failure, contain and isolate failure, and inoculate against future failure. And basic things like, do you have tamper-evident forensically sound evidence capture, do not exist in most medical. In fact, yesterday on the microphone, I told you 0 cars have it because the privacy advocates have fought it pretty hard. But these basics have to be put in place so that you can have a defensible thing. All systems fail. We saw that with the bus yesterday, right? All systems fail, all of them. The question is, are you prepared to handle failure in a graceful way? So none of this says you're going to be unhackable. It was just about what's your posture for those inevitable failures. Now, I could spend a whole book on this. I might. I could spend a whole week teaching on this. But one of the things I do is that when people say, why don't we just use NIST National Cybersecurity Framework for IoT or safety critical, why don't we just use best practices or some ISO standard? I say, look, let's just break it down. Most of our best practices have some baked-in assumptions. So if you abstract them, how can you marshal yourself through a checklist like that, or a SANS top 20 controls? And make sure you're explicitly working out your biases. So if you think about it, most of our rules of thumb anticipate an economically rational adversary who is after the confidentiality of information in a multi-layered, multi-perimetered network with certain Wintel or Unix architectures, with a robust VC community and price margins and whatnot, with a time to live for that capital expenditure that's pretty predictable. But if you marshal yourselves through those, we have very different adversaries with different motives, including people like Trick. You have incredibly different consequences of failure, including a loss of human life, property damage, some sort of crisis of confidence in large chunks of our economy, like 1/6 of our economy in healthcare. You've got migratory devices. Your insulin pump may be its own perimeter, right? It doesn't sit in one place. There is no layers of anything. The hardware, firmware, software stack's different. The economics might be negative margins. Johnson & Johnson tried to sell off their Animas insulin pump line because they're losing money on it. They couldn't find a buyer. They decided to exit it. The economics of this space can't currently support any additional incremental security dollars. There's no buyer, there's no investor, there's no clear economic flow. And the times to live are vastly different. Some of these devices are intended to live for 15 to 20 years, but they end up living 30 to 45. So what do you do when the time to live of the durable goods is so out of phase with the time to live of the operating system that runs upon it? And those can become wicked problems. Now, in the middle of all this, all these different fires and all this progress, we had a different attack that came out of nowhere, because I had intended to drive all of our regulatory focus on safety-critical IoT, because we're not going to regulate software, we're not going to regulate small, cheap IoT devices. And then Mirai happened. And Mirai was a big game changer, because of this low-cost, low-hygiene, this long tail of low-cost, low-hygiene devices, these $100 cameras, collectively took out the internet for a day, half day. Took out Spotify, Netflix, CNN right during election season, right? We couldn't get access to information. Commerce was disrupted. And this was a real punch in the gut, because we had previously said, let's just focus on the really expensive, highly regulated, safety-critical stuff, and then later on we'll do other stuff. And if we just add transparency or software bill of materials or things like that, we'll be okay. But these really cheap devices nobody cares about revealed kind of a tragedy of the commons problem, an externalities problem. Because even if I can get labeling on devices, and even if everybody in this room buys the more safe cameras, it doesn't matter, because the people in the room downstairs buy the cheap ones and they can still hurt us. So this tsunami of technical debt and security debt took out the internet. And I used to work at Akamai. Akamai can't handle the size and volume of these anymore. The math just doesn't work. There's too many of them. And it's not like eventually there are going to be too many. There's already too many. So this was a real catalyzing event for some of the public policy makers. And what scares me is the quick fixes are actually really, really, really dangerous. Brickerbot was one of several vigilante worms that went around finding some of these cheap IoT devices and smashed them. Different methods of smashing them, flash fry, the memory, whatever, overwrite boot sectors. But this was highly destructive, which is, people felt okay because it was $100 cameras mostly housed in Vietnam. But if you look and you squint, and there's a lot of scientists in this room, if you squint, the three characteristics that enabled Mirai, they were internet addressable, they had fixed credentials, so they were fairly easy to rope into a botnet, and they were unpatchable. Again, internet facing, fixed credentials, unpatchable. You know what I just described? Most medical equipment, including $500,000 imaging equipment. I just described most industrial controls equipment, which normally would enjoy a fictitious air gap, sometimes breached. But now with predictive maintenance and the idea of connected everything, connected factories and Industry 4.0, we're deliberately poking through that once fictitious air gap. So when I look at this, the next Mirai could be composed of medical equipment hooked up to human beings. And some idiotic move like a Brickerbot could be destroying devices hooked to humans, or could destroy a pressure gauge sensor on an oil and gas pipeline. This is not okay. We're not close to bad. We're already in really bad territory. People celebrated the Brickerbot. They thought it was fantastic. It scared the bejesus out of me. So I'm going to talk about a trio of responses that happened in about a 4 or 5 week period. So I was privileged to serve on a congressional task force, part of the CISA Act, the Computer Information Security Act of 2015. They asked for a 21-person task force for cybersecurry for healthcare. They did not know about Hollywood Presbyterian. That happened after the law passed, but just before we started. We like to joke that it was hazardous to our health. So one of the 3 legs of this stool was we were just about to publish our findings, over 100 recommendations, some pretty bold stuff. Right when we're about to publish, WannaCry hits, our worst nightmare come true, taking out significant chunks of the national health care in the UK. And then a couple weeks later, we did CyberMed Summit. But I'm going to walk you through this trinity. So this is the name of the task force report. I'm going to show you the graphic that we had unanimous consensus on, despite some incredibly risk-averse people. So look at the headline, Healthcare Cybersecurity is in Critical Condition. I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I'm going to give you my color commentary. The first one is that there's an incredible lack of security talent in healthcare. Our best case estimate, we don't have hard numbers, but our estimate is 85% of the health delivery organizations in the US lack a single security person. Not one. Not one. So even if you were to say, can you please do a self-assessment against the NIST cybersecurity framework, there's no one to do it. if you were to give an FBI alert or an InfraGard alert saying, please shut off, any devices running, JBoss because the SamSam ransomware is, destroying hospitals, there's no one to go figure that out. So 85%, and there's no money to even consider adding a single security person. They have more janitors than they have security people, which of course you want janitors for cleanliness, but as we're increasingly dependent on this connected technology, the cyber hygiene is as important as scrubbing in for surgery. You would never do surgery in a filthy room or without scrubbing in. It costs money, it takes time, it takes surgeon time, it takes surgical wing time. It's worth it because of post-op infections. We haven't yet conditioned ourselves to invest in minimum viable security talent. And worse, the government's competing on that very finite supply chain of talent for other purposes, so we're robbing it. Number two, legacy equipment is a public health issue. These are often running Windows XP as a best case scenario. Not only is Windows XP end of life, folks, its successor Vista is also end of life. And you can actually get brand new devices approved through the FDA in current ruling with Windows XP today. So not only is there a swamp, we can't really drain the swamp because we keep adding to it. So legacy is a really big issue. So even if you had the JP Morgan Chase team of 2,000 people, you're defending much older stuff. The third one's actually the government's fault by accident. In our race to want to get to electronic health records, we did this well-intentioned but idiotic thing called meaningful use, where we tied reimbursement for medical technology to the ability to receive or transmit electronic health records. So do you think we designed and threat modeled and implemented brand new device types to be able to responsibly handle that transmission? No, we slapped on connectivity to everything. So devices never meant to be connected to a single thing are all of a sudden in a very brittle and poorly interoperable way connected to everything. And what this led to is unsegmented networks where the blast radius is now the entire hospital. And these devices are over-connected to each other and reachable by the outside world in most cases. So even if you had a security team, it's almost impossible to do basic network segmentation because the devices just don't function if they can't talk to places. Number four, vulnerabilities affect patient care. What we meant when we wrote this bullet was the Hollywood Presbyterian existence proof. And that's due to that extreme blast radius of all the things when one thing gets hit. Mostly through electronic health record systems, by the way, not so much medical devices, but the EHRs. And then lastly, if you think this is a rare occurrence, we looked at one particular medical technology, not even an FDA one, just a medical technology, that had over 1,400 known vulnerabilities in it. 1,400. And if you think that was anomalous, we routinely found several with over 1,000 CVEs. And if you've ever heard me talk about how badly managed CVE is, it's actually a lot worse than the numbers that are disclosed, especially in medical. I'm a big fan of CVE. It's really doing a bad job on medical. But you tie these things together, most of these places, 85% don't have a single person guarding it. They're guarding harder to defend things that are over-connected to each other and reachable by the outside world. A single flaw in a single tech can take out a whole hospital, not confidentiality of data, delivery of patient care. And the average device could give you 1,000 or more chances to do so. So we've been very lucky to date. We've always been prone. We've been prey. We just lacked predators. But that's gone. That obscurity is over. In fact, in the course of the task force, healthcare went from almost untargeted to the #1 target of ransomware. Some of them are accidents, like WannaCry wasn't targeting healthcare, hit a lot of it. Some of them are deliberate campaigns because they know the hospitals pay. MedStar, all the others. So I got a big fight. I said, guys, we have to have a single qualified person. We have to tell Congress it's not going to be okay to have this level of connectivity if we don't have a single qualified person. And in some sleep-deprived state, after fighting WannaCry for 4 or 5 days straight, we were part of the emergency response for the US and the Allies. We got lucky because some hacker found a kill switch where it was checking for a domain that didn't exist to see if it was being emulated. So he's like, I'll just register the domain. And he killed the propagation before it really hit the US. But I said this, I said, if you can't afford to protect it, you can't afford to connect it, right? You gotta put it on bumper sticker. They were furious. Hospitals were so mad, they wanted my blood. I wasn't trying to punish them or kick them. I just really felt like if you're over-dependent on undependable things, you can either make them more dependable or depend upon them less, right? And I'm just trying to starkly state that we are way upside down on our mortgage. So you guys already know from my previous picture, I'm a huge Stan Lee fan. I tweaked it a little bit, right? With great connectivity comes great responsibility. It's a little less preachy sounding, but the bottom line is I might want to drive a tractor trailer truck. I'm not allowed to. I have to demonstrate that I can do it responsibly. I need to be licensed to do that. So maybe this idea of connect everything to everything else before we have sufficient training or staff to do so is really reckless. And maybe what we need to do is have some sort of tiered model where everybody can do this level of connectivity, but if you really want to do some of the other stuff, you're going to have to demonstrate competence. But that's not the conversation we're having. We just want what we want, and we want it now. So the second wave of this three-legged stool was WannaCry, right? We had dreaded this. This was, again, malicious intent is not a prerequisite to harm, a terribly written piece of ransomware. It was very few people paid the ransom. If you did, it wasn't clear you were going to get your stuff back. It was pretty much junk, but this piece of junk took out 81 hospitals in the UK. It affected 41% of their total capacity as a country. And some of the facilities it hit were stroke centers. And when you have a stroke, you've got 3 hours before permanent damage and or death. Most of the stroke centers were gone. So we know there was a massive uptake in fatalities. It may not have been day one, but we know more people died because of this attack. And we're trying to use Freedom of Information Act equivalents to pull the statistics to do the deltas. Now, how do we know this? A marathon study in the New England Journal of Medicine kind of gave us the hint. We worked very closely with some physician hackers. And they basically said, look, they studied the Boston Marathon. And they said, I bet you more people die during the Boston Marathon than any other day of the year, specifically heart attacks. And then they checked 4 different US cities to see if it was longitudinally consistent. And what they found was pretty simple. If you have a heart attack on the day of a marathon, you had on average a 4.4 minute longer ambulance ride. 4.4 minutes is a long time if you're having a heart attack. And what it led to is a statistically significant increase in mortality rates after 30, 60, 90 days. So not every condition is going to be fatal if you have this, but the abstraction wasn't don't run marathons. The abstraction was delayed and degraded patient care for heart, brain, or pulmonary, I think, have severe outcomes, severe impact on outcomes such as mortality rates. So what does that mean? It means it doesn't matter if it's a marathon or a ransomware or a denial of service attack, delayed and degraded patient care, regardless of cause, leads to increased fatality. So we keep saying, well, someone's going to have to die first. People are dying. So to really drive this home, the third leg of the stool, it just so happened to be almost 4 years in the making. On the first anniversary of the cavalry at DEF CON, in the green room, we bump into these 2 young guys wearing white coats. Like, what are you 2 doing here? They're like, oh, we're speaking. I said, are you doctors? They said, no, we're med students. But we hacked the 911 system in our hospital network, and we're presenting on it. I'm like, wait, so you're physicians and you're hackers? And I said, yeah. I'm like, we got to do something together. So we took a long time to plan it, but we finally this past summer did the CyberMed Summit for the first ever clinical hacking simulation. And part of the reason was they made fun of us. They said, guys, you keep talking about hacking a pacemaker. Unless you're one of the 4% of the people that need every beat of their heart, you know what would happen if you hacked a pacemaker? They'd get tired. They'd complain at the next doctor visit. They'd flash the firmware. It doesn't matter. They're not going to die. You're not going to have like a movie plot scene. So you're barking up the wrong tree, and the physicians aren't going to take you seriously. I'm like, okay, well, is the answer that I should just sleep well at night? They said, oh, no, we can kill people with hacking. Just you're barking up the wrong tree, and we'll show you. So we did the CyberMed Summit. 2 days. We pulled together as many stakeholders as we could from the federal government, from state and local, from the city. We had the mayor's office, the governor's office, FEMA, DHS, HHS, FDA, as many people as we could that could participate. The first day was presentations and 3 clinical hacking simulations. The second day was tabletop exercises, really, really lightweight, cheap tabletop exercises to see what broke and when. So let's see. The 3 scenarios, which I will not get into all of them, is one, my least favorite was we had a car accident that was caused because the insulin pump was hacked, gave an excessive dose of insulin. Driver passed out, they treated the wounds, and never once thought to look at the root cause. So it complicated and delayed the emergency response. The second one was which I'm going to show the video of, the second one was actually a bedside infusion pump. one of the most common medical devices. You get morphine or saline or some other sort of thing. We gave a calcium blocker to someone having a heart problem. And through a hacked instruction set, we gave a 3-hour dose in 30 seconds. So the appropriate amount, delivered way too fast, caused cardiac arrest. Third one was a pacemaker defibrillator. We used really vulnerable architecture to replace the firmware. And it administered electroshock every minute on the minute for the patient, causing incredible pain, but also based on the heart rhythm. If it's Russian roulette, if you zap at the wrong moment, you cause a cardiac arrest. So the device meant to save them from a cardiac arrest was actually causing asystole. So I'm going to show a quick video of that. It's worth noting that all 3 patients coded. None of the physicians knew they were hacked. They all implicitly trusted the technology. None of them, when pressed, were going to ask for an autopsy because people die in the ER all the time. And the way these things work, if you don't know, if anybody that works in this business, is they drill all the time. These are incredibly amazing facilities. Basically, think of what would you do if you were a physician and a pregnant woman came into the ER and needed a defibrillator? Well, you'd get the shock paddles out, right? The problem is there's 2 heartbeats. So they drill in these rarer but still common things, and they use professional actors who know how to present symptoms interactively, and that's their full-time job. And they use different dummies that have different physiology with real, lifelike ribs that crack and they bleed right and the organs in the right place. So they stage and set up these simulations. Doctors don't know what they're getting into, but they drill and then they go back to their job. So in this particular case, we just introduced some actual hacking. Now, Nightline covered it for a 9-minute segment. They did a pretty good job, pretty responsible, even-keeled job on it. This is Dr. Henderson. He's the one I'm going to show you. He's actually the chief. So we didn't pick schleps or med students. We picked people that really knew what they were doing. And while this is not the one that scares me the most, it does play well on television. So here goes. I'm going to voice over some of this. So the guy in the white coat is our guinea pig, Dr. Henderson. This is Jeff Tully. He's our hacker physician friend. He's a pediatrician / anesthesiologist. Everyone knows what's happening except for Dr. Henderson.
Yes, we copy.
My favorite actor. Can you hear?
He's based at 60. Okay. 60. 110 over 74. On your count. 1, 2, 3. All right, sir. Hi, sir. I'm Dr. Henderson. So I heard a little bit about what's been going on. What is in your own words? What brought you into it? What got you falling into it?
I was watching TV at home and I started having these shocking chest pains. And it happens about every minute. And each time it happens, it feels like my chest is going to burst.
Have you ever had a pain like this before?
No, please don't. You got to stop it. I got a heart block, and I got a pacemaker, and a shocker. And I think it keeps shocking me.
Okay, do you know what type of heart block you have?
I don't know, am I going to die?
We're going to try to make sure that doesn't happen today, sir.
Ah! Oh!
Hey, can we get an EKG and total read off the chest X-ray as well? Yeah, we can get him.
This is Jeff.
Do we have ID access? Yes. Okay, can we give him more morphine? All right. So there's any belly pain?
Ah! Oh, stop that!
This actually took an hour. I'm only showing you 6 minutes at most.
Oh, please!
All right, so he's basically hit that Russian roulette. So he's coding asystole. It's called, it's called R-on-T. He figures it out later. So whenever they have to do something invasive, like chest compressions, It's not like on TV, ribs break pretty much every time you do that. So they want dummy to feel like you would really were giving chest compression. So this is a dummy. And for the remainder, you're going to have the actor on microphone.
So we can try and shock him at the first pulse check.
All right. Effie's drawn up but not given.
So this is the first time he died.
Just hold on to it for right now. We'll wait for the first pulse check.
Now their training says you should take a magnet that's in every ER and you put it on the chest because there's a design fail-safe where the magnet will put it into a safe factory mode. Where do you think the logic for going to a safe factory mode lives?
Okay, sir.
So he's back screaming again.
Can we get an EKG? So you're gonna be okay. We just had a. Just shock him back. Looks like you probably just shocked him back. Can we try the magnet again? Do we have the magnet over there?
Yes, I have a magnet.
All right, so he's asking about the magnet. So they're training to put the magnet there because malfunctions happen. The problem is it's enforced by software, which we replaced. So the magnet doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Okay, we still have that Effie drawn up?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
pass it on. Thank you.
So now they're intubating because I think he's coded 3 times by this point. Still trying to figure out what to do about it.
We got it, Tyler? Okay, everybody clear the bed? No. Okay. Okay, looks like we got this perfect spacing now. So the case isn't, so now we need to try and address this AITB problem. I mean, why didn't it more stop? So it's probably shocking him during repolarization of ventricles. I think it's called an RMT phenomenon. And what it's doing is, well, it's repolarizing, it distributes another shock to the ventricles, and then that can take from the asystole, and that's exactly what happened.
And he's right. He figures out what's happening, just doesn't know what to do about it.
Do we have an intervention cardiologist?
This is Dr. Cardiology. How can I help you?
Hi, Dr. Cardiology. This is Dr. Henderson, the ED. How are you doing today?
Doing okay. You bothered me. What's up?
So we have a 75-year-old male here who came in. He has feeling chest pain. He has an ICD place for a third-degree heart block. And that could be, go ahead and continue chest compression. He has this AICD. It seems to be delivering him shocks every minute. He's been getting shocked into BFib and exercise asystole. We put the magnet on. The magnet did not work. Did not put an asystole. We really put the magnet on. Right now we're doing chest compressions right now to try and make sure we get out of this rhythm. But don't forget to get crossback every time they shot back to the rhythm. Yes.
Alright. He's currently in ventricular fibrillation.
So yes, our whole chest compression. He's paced to get it.
Alright, listen. If he keeps going in and out, can we think you could... Alright.
What's
Go
the
ahead in the chest and disconnect the leads.
So go right over the ICD, open the chest up, and disconnect, please.
Yeah, I don't know anything else you can do.
Okay, can we get set up for that? Yeah.
So they got to crack them open, cut the lead wires, but they have to do it while there's electroshock every minute. So it is fake blood, but there is blood, so I will skip it. This is Dr. Cardiology. He finally comes in, but it was an we wrote the scenario. We knew in general what was going to happen, and it was an exhausting hour on the table. Now the patient's stable, had the lead wires cut. In fact, the real scare at the end was that they finally did it and they wanted to exhale. The patient needs pacing and wasn't getting it anymore, so they had to do external pacing. So there was just wave after wave after wave of curveballs that didn't conform. Now, so we gave them hints, and obviously we wanted to scare them but not demoralize them. So all 3 patients sort of lived because of the hints we gave them. But I think the real lesson, especially for the one that scares me more, the bedside infusion pump, when we told the toxicology person, picked at random, she actually administered the right antidote. When she realized what had happened and there was an overdose of calcium blocker, she gave calcium in the proper dosage. But that too was given in 30 seconds instead of 30 minutes. So she said, oh, if I knew it was hacked, I would have grabbed the device in the room next door. Would that have worked? We hacked the libraries for all of the devices in the hospital. It's like, what the heck are we supposed to do? And then someone said, well, wouldn't it show up in an autopsy? She said, I wouldn't have ordered one. And then someone else said, those devices have no logging. You wouldn't have found anything. So the hospital administrators got really scared, like, what do we do? You know, we can't buy brand new ones for everything. I said, well, don't spend more money, spend your money better. Look at those 5 things we asked for in the Hippocratic Oath. So only patron devices that have evidence logging, that have disclosure programs for white hats, that have the ability to get security updates. And they said, sure, but if they're still going to get hacked, what do we do? And there's a huge hour-long debate. Do we buy 2 different makes and models so we don't have a class break of every device? Does that double the training? Does that confuse the user interface? But really meaningful conversations stimulated because they've never once thought to distrust the integrity of the system. And it doesn't mean they have to become new surgeons. They do differential diagnoses all the time. They call them a zebra when things don't conform to normal. But when they're in the mode that this is normal stuff, they'll miss the zebras. So we want to condition them just long enough to think, okay, this isn't a horse, it's a zebra. And start to be more skeptical and fuzzy-eyed in their analysis. Day 2, we did tabletop exercises. We did essentially an extortionware. We didn't really hack anything. We logged in with default passwords to the HVAC system, the building automation system, and the EHR. And then we just locked them out. We knew in round 1 we'd take out 1 hospital, the hospital we were sitting in Phoenix, Arizona. In round 2, we were going to do it to plural hospitals to see if that further compounded the problem because you can't divert ambulances within a safe driving distance. And in round 3, we're going to add a bombing at the Arizona Diamondbacks, just like the Boston Marathon bombing, to see what would happen. And normally you save the most urgently hurt, but in crisis situations they call it mass casualty event. They whip out badges like we were all wearing that have color codes, and you save the savable. So you decide who's going to live and who's going to die. You flip it. We expected that to happen. We didn't know when. It happened in round 1. 1 hospital, just locking them out, and we were dumbfounded. It happened for a couple reasons. One, didn't know this. We took out the elevators, so there's no surgeries anymore because there's no surgery floors on the ground floor. So it couldn't move patients up and down, no surgeries. So anyone who needed the surgery and couldn't be moved in time died. The second reason, it's 116 degrees that day. So in these big glass buildings, as soon as we lost HVAC, bad things started happening. And the third one, which was the one nobody anticipated, because all the people that go testify to Congress say, we don't need electronic health records. If we lost them, we'd just go to paper copies. Who's heard that before? Okay, so the chief medical officer says, all right, let's just flip the paper records. We've got them printed out. And everyone looked at him funny. And he's like, do it. And he said, sir, we haven't trained in 6 years on paper records. No one in this building has ever seen one, let alone ordered one. And he turned white because it's not a matter of just going to a gymnasium with the National Guard. If you can't access their blood types, their allergies, their medical history, it's pretty reckless to deliver care for many symptoms unless that's a life-saving moment. So those 3 alone started to really reveal seams and cracks much earlier than we anticipated. So we took it a little easy on them in rounds 2 and 3. But what should be relevant here is this is not a really heavy lift cyberstorm exercise every 2 to 3 years. This can be done everywhere. We could do this with every mayor in every major city. Pick your hospital, pick your stakeholders from hospitals, and do a simple lightweight tabletop exercise. No cost. It's just designing what they know and running them through it. In fact, the following week we went to the National Governors Association and said this should be a 50-state initiative. Like, pick your favorite city. We'll start somewhere small. The real benefit of this is if you combine those 3 things, we had a blueprint in the task force report for how to rise to prepare for these challenges. Number 2, we had WannaCry with an existence proof saying this can happen now, and it's very damaging when it does. And then because there's holdouts in the physicians and the leadership in hospitals, we wanted a very visceral, palpable, personal experience. It said, wow, we're not trained for this. And I think that's going to be the kind of critical mass that has to come together to catalyze corrective action. because it can't just be hackers, it can't be just be politicians, it's going to have to be a whole community where everyone collectively says, all right, we get it. What can we do? And you don't have to throw tons of money at this. It may simply be that we need to start training people more on paper records, like we always said we were. It doesn't have to be a heavy lift, but you got to know what your bottlenecks are, and we don't. Now, I am running low on time, so I'm going to go much faster. I squeezed these in because of some conversation yesterday. Please don't throw food at me, but I have been trying to drive a lot of regulatory action and even legislative action that's clueful. The idea of we don't want any government involvement is naive. They're going to do it with or without us. The question is it going to be thoughtful, planful, technically literate? Will we have a hand in it? Will we minimize harm? Will we focus on evergreen principles? So one of the responses to Mirai that I want to call out, because it's a very reasonable bill that a lot of our kind hates because we just don't want any technology legislation. And it's not perfect, but make it better. Senator Warner was terrified by the Mirai botnet and basically said, so I've been hearing that if we regulate IoT or software, we're going to stifle innovation and hurt the economy. But Mirai kind of showed me that if we don't regulate IoT, we hurt the economy. So what's the middle ground here? And I just threw a ton of stuff at him, and so did somebody from Berkman Center. And the result in August 1st, several months later, was a procurement bill. So it's not trying to change the world. It's saying anything sold to the federal government must do 5 things. And they're going to sound familiar based on how Mirai worked. Number 1, you should be free of known vulnerabilities at the time of sale or disclose the ones that you have. So if you got known vulnerabilities, just say so. Number 2, you should be patchable, because one of the big issues with Mirai was they were not patchable. Number 3, no fixed credentials. So you shouldn't sell something to the federal government with a password that you can't change if you wanted to. Number 4, you should use standard-based crypto and protocols or declare when you're not. So just try to funnel people towards proven standards instead of cute parlor tricks. And number 5, you should have a coordinated vulnerability disclosure program inviting researchers acting in good faith to report issues to you and give them safe harbor from CFA and DMCA violations if they follow it. So really, really simple stuff, and it's hard to argue that a password of passwords a good thing now or 10 years from now. Chamber of Commerce and Oracle and some of the other trade associations are still fighting it hard. But you know, Will Hurd, the chairman of that committee in the House, when I did the House testimony, he gave it to him. He goes, can you name a single use case, past, present, or future, where it's acceptable to have a password of password that we can't change? Go ahead, take all the time you want. And he couldn't do it, obviously. But they're still putting up a big fight. Now, if we can't get reasonable measures, like no fixed credentials, how can we win anything big, right? So this is a pretty interesting fork in the road where we're going to be a silent group of experts, and this might not even be the right list. There's some stuff I wanted in there, like a software bill of materials, an ingredients list. Didn't make the cut. But what is reasonable as a baby step, even if it's just federal procurement to maybe catalyze and stimulate corrective action? And we're going to have to do it fast because we're not eventually going to have harm in hospitals. We're already having it. So some of those principles I've been trying to push, and I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. I'm a huge Deming fan. I'm a huge DevOps fan. I'm a huge Agile and Lean fan because if constant change is the battlefield, the ability to notice and respond to change quickly is going to be the virtue. So what am I doing? I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm trying to steal cyber supply chain principles from Deming, from Toyota in the 40s. This was like years before the Ralph Nader book in the 70s about safety. This is about profitable, high-quality engineering of vehicles that made money for your shareholders. And these 3 principles are not really applied to software. He said, do you have fewer and better suppliers? Do you have the highest quality parts from those suppliers? And you track which parts went where. So when there's a need to do a recall, you can do a prompt and agile response. So in the software world, since 90% of our software is assembled from third-party and open source code, I've been pushing supply chain transparency. So what's your software bill of materials of all the third-party and open source libraries used? Are there any known vulnerabilities in them? And do you have the ability to promptly respond when things go wrong? Now, I'm going to pivot. This is something Carl did at the first DHS workshop on building codes for connected medical devices. And if you remember the Haitian earthquake, it was a 7.0 Richter scale. It killed 230,000 people. So we had lots of humanitarian relief. 6 weeks later, got almost no coverage. Chile had a much stronger 8.8 Richter scale, logarithmic. It got no coverage. Well, it didn't get any coverage because it hardly killed anybody. It killed 279 people, 3 decimal points less. And when they studied and isolated for all factors, it came down to pretty much one thing: building codes. Chile had them, Haiti didn't. Inferior building materials and building codes. So the idea is we don't have building codes for building code. And this is why I don't think it's just a strategic workforce for cybersecurity. I think developers, everyone building digital infrastructure upon which we increasingly depend, should understand the awesome responsibility that comes with writing code, especially for safety critical stuff. Now, years before the cavalry, I wrote the Rugged Software Manifesto. I'm going to read you 2 lines from that. I recognize my code will be attacked by talented and persistent adversaries who threaten our physical, economic, and national security. That's what the hackers like. The developers like this line. I recognize my code will be used in ways I cannot anticipate, in ways it was not designed for longer than ever intended. But we really haven't understood how foundational software has become, and it is becoming. And we're going to have to do something about that. And we talk about the cliche of built-in versus bolted-on. When the waste shirt factory had a fire in New York, and it was on an upper floor, every single factory worker died. And as a knee-jerk reaction to that, we commanded that all buildings had to have fire escapes. So this is an ugly, iron, painted, rusty fire escape on the outside of the building. So you paid to build the building, and then you paid to bolt on, literally bolt on, a fire escape. So can anybody spot the fire escape on my building I'm moving into in January? Anybody see it? No, it's because it's built in. In fact, I watched this building being constructed well before I knew I'd worked there. That center column was the first thing built. It's the elevators, it's the bomb shelter, it's the very wide stairwells. If this thing gets hit by a meteor, that column will probably still be standing. Right? So we didn't build the building and then put some security on. It's not just integrated, it's part of the integral weight-bearing aspect of that structure. So it's beautiful, it's not extra costly, but this only happens when you build it into design requirements from the get-go, and it's a part of how we build stuff, and we don't do that. So back to that graphic, why did this bother me? Well, it's undeniable that physical and digital have converged. They have come together. We are instrumenting everything. And while they have come together, I do fear that crisis of confidence. So they have come together on their own. What's going to keep it together is the S, right? The safety and security that this room has to bring, because no one else is going to bring it. So we've done some incredible things to make individual superheroes. And we've done some incredible things to fight the tides. We're going to need step function growth to figure out how do we maintain this, because all the promise of connected medicine, all the promise of connected factories, all the promise of Industrial 4.0 shatters if we have a single exotic death. It's not going to go away forever, but think of the connected vehicles. 37,000 deaths in the US every year. 96% are human error and human choice. So those handful of deaths we've now seen in connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, way smaller than the number caused by humans. It is demonstrably safer than human drivers. And an exotic death will postpone the confidence of the public by 5 or 10 years to actually address those and embrace those. I want the benefits of innovation. So I think what it really comes down to is, I'm going to channel my Dan Gearisms here. This is the newer sentence from our foundational problem statement. But it's through our overdependence on undependable things that have created the conditions such that any outlier, trick, WannaCry, an accident, can have a profound and asymmetric impact on human life, economic, and national security. So when you're overdependent, you can depend less, which is probably the most prudent course of action in some spots, or you can make them more dependable, which is a longer, slower process, especially for the protracted life cycles. If I wanted to make a medical device today, it takes about 6 years to go from inception through R&D, through testing, through clinical trials, through approval. And then the time to live is about 15 years. So you got about 21-year time to live from inception through retirement. What's the average lifespan of supported Windows operating system? It's almost impossible to actually have a supported operating system by the time you go to actual deployment. So we've got to have radically different reference architectures that loosely couple durable goods from plural operating systems, or we need high assurance operating systems that aren't commercial for safety critical and national security use cases, or we need a different architecture entirely. But the current way we're approaching it needs engineering and it needs cybersecurity, but it's not one or the other. So back to the fires, we've had several. We're going to have several more. I'm hopeful that as appetites emerge to do something, we've risen to the level where we're willing to go to uncomfortable places and say uncomfortable things, and even unpopular things. Because if it's not sitting in your seat to the left or right of you, I don't know who's going to do it. So with that, I thank you for your time. I am not the cavalry, you are. All right.
Okay, I think after that presentation, we're just all kind of sitting there soaking this all in. I think it was a fantastic close to a great couple of days. And as of today, I don't know of any buses that broke down or any weather emergencies, so we survived our second and final day of the symposium. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank our partners in particular for being such great sponsors and helping us put these programs together. And so I wish everybody safe travels, and hopefully we'll see you next year.